We need to be louder. Scott introduced himself already. We have Jesse Willer, our city engineer here.
Hello, everybody.
Katie Marcelon, special project manager. I'm Brittany Powell, project manager on this project, probably the one you guys have heard from quite a bit. Natalie Arroyo, County Supervisor for the 4th District. Chief Brian Stevens we have here. And Robin Prasker, she is an environmental project manager with the city of Eureka. So tonight's agenda, first I'm going to give a presentation on the Beta Zoo Trail. We do ask to hold questions to the end. We got pre-submitted questions. We had a ton, probably about 70 to 80 questions. So I grouped them into categories that we will try to address a few from each category. Any that you didn't get answers to, feel free to follow up with me. And also at the end, we do want to open it up for an opportunity to ask follow-up questions. The presentation materials are available on the city website if you would like to see them at that address there, as well as all the questions that we've received. All those questions are there. You can read through them. They're available for you. Little housekeeping. The restroom is this way through this door. There's blue tape on the ground to direct you to the bathroom. We have some refreshments, and there's a email sign up in the back if you want to receive information from me, press releases, updates, anything like that. You can put your email on there.
Can I jump in real quick?
Please.
One little
Yeah.
piece of housekeeping. I don't know if you've been watching council meetings lately. They've been contentious, to say the least, and we always talk about decorum, like treating each other with respect, respecting each other's opinions. All I ask is that we, let each other speak, speak in turn, and just understand, that this is contentious for some, for others, they're excited about it. And so just want to recognize that we all have opinions. We all want what's best for our city. And so hopefully we can kind of, just let this process play out, listen to each other, and, see what is transpiring. And the one last thing I want to say is staff, and this is a constant thing I see at council meetings. Staff are treated like they're the ones, instigating this project. They're not. They're just messengers, right? They're doing the will of the city, and in this case, a project that's been going on for a long time. So understand these are great staff, hardworking people, and they're just delivering a message. If you want to focus, your issues, put it on me and our city council. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Could you go back to the last slide? I was trying to get that email address.
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
thank you.
The website's right there.
I don't write as quick as I used to.
No worries. So I will start. This trail's been a concept for quite some time. We are kind of in, just a beginning phase for a lot of this. It's been a concept for so long. But really, we're getting started now. So a Beta Zoo Trail overview. This will add approximately 2 miles of Class 1 trail and 1 mile of Class 3 bike lanes and sidewalk improvements. The alignment that you will see is currently preliminary. There's nothing confirmed at this time. It's all preliminary. The trail will create important connections and is a safe routes to school project and encourages and promotes multimodal and active transportation. This is on a handout that I have up front, as well as we do have a story map website. There's QR codes on that handout to visit our website and get all the information that you'll see here as well. Brief history. This actually came around in 2000 when City Council created the Eureka Trail Committee. The committee discussed a green belt trail through Eureka Gulches that would connect schools and neighborhoods to the waterfront. In 2017, Eureka City Schools in the city identified the Beta Zoo Trail as a safe route to school project. And in 2018, the City Council designated the Beta Zoo Trail as a strategic visioning goal. 2020, the city began environmental studies with funding from the California Coastal Conservancy and conducted phone outreach to residents near the trail. In 2021, city hosted virtual community meetings and Planning Commission approved Beta Zoo environmental analysis document. In 2023, the Beta Zoo Trail project was awarded funding from Active Transportation Program. And in 2024, the environmental field studies and reports under NEPA were led by City, GHD, and Caltrans were all completed. Little overview on the project funding to date. We've received $100,000 from the California Coastal Conservancy, nearly $9 million from the California Active Transportation Program. City of Eureka had a matching fund of $1 million that was allocated in 2024. California State Transportation Improvement Program, $1.5 million. Humboldt County Association of Governments, $70,000, specific for pedestrian and bicycle. And the Local Highway Safety Improvement Program, $346,000. It's just over $11,000 in grant funding that we've received so far, which makes up about 92% of the funding. Project timeline. A big project like this, there's always some adjustments. The Beta Zoo Trail project just completed the preliminary engineering and environmental studies phase and is entering the right-of-way, kind of the easements and design phases. These phases are expected to run concurrently and last 9 to 12 months, with construction currently expected to begin potentially in 2027. And these are all preliminary. We never know how long things take. So we want to go into the preliminary alignment a little bit, starting from the north. The Beta Zoo Trail will connect at the existing waterfront trail near Tid Street, near the Open Door Community Health Center. This segment will be designed and constructed as elevated paths to preserve natural character of the landscape and minimize potential impacts to wildlife. We have received feedback on metal bridges, specifically noise impacts. This will be taken into consideration during the design.
So Brittany, that's not on the road?
What's that?
That's not on the road on Tid Street?
It will let's see, that's a pointer, I believe. Right here, this is Open Door Community Health. So these would be kind of like elevated paths, not on the road here. And here, wrong button. This is Myrtle Avenue right here for reference.
So where on Myrtle does it come out?
At McFarland?
The igloos.
Yep.
Is that where the igloos?
Yes, very close to the igloos, yes. Also at Myrtle and McFarland is the plan for Eureka's first roundabout. Roundabouts provide traffic calming, reduce speeds, and result in safer pedestrian crossings. There will be high visibility signage, and we're exploring rapid flashing beacons. We'll explore that during the design. A trailhead parking lot is also planned for just north of Myrtle, near the roundabout. The roundabout will be carefully designed to accommodate for fire trucks and semis. And the city is also working with the Humboldt Transit Authority on a potential bus stop. Okay. The next section is the Second Gulch, and also kind of known as the McFarland area. Second Gulch portion of the trail will be designed and constructed above an existing sewer line access road. The trail is proposed to follow the alignment of the existing sewer easement. However, new easements for public trail access will have to be secured. More on this will hit on during the right-of-way portion of this presentation.
Brittany, where is McFarland?
McFarland is, sorry, it's clear if you look online here, but McFarland is right here.
And where's the lower field at Zane?
We haven't hit, it'll be about right about here.
Thank you.
Okay. This leads us into the Zane Middle School section. The city has worked really closely with Eureka City Schools District on how the trail will pass Zane Middle School. Together we'll discuss options and feasibility of fencing, gates, and lighting, and how that looks is all preliminary and how we're conversing, but the alignment is going to stick with behind the back field here.
Back of the field.
The lower field. The star you see here is the view. This view here is what It is, I took that during school hours. There's not a lot of visibility to the campus, yeah. And we would like to point out the campus is currently open. There are a lot of people that use the lower field as a dog park and walk it regularly. So this trail will, there will be more people accessing it, but more eyes, proper usage, and potentially gates that secure the campus a little bit better.
So where's Booner?
We'll get to that one next.
Okay.
Yep. You're just right on it.
Sorry.
All right, the second Gulch Boone section. So I'll show, this is Boone here,
What street did you say it is?
Boone.
Boone, or Booner.
Bonnie.
Boone is here. Zane is up here. St. Joseph's Hospital is here.
Is the trail that comes from the lower field to Booner, is that along the little creek there?
It'll go over it, yes.
Did I hear you say questions are for later?
Yes, please, yes. If I can clarify a little bit while we're on the map, that's fine. But yeah, let's not get wild with it. The planned pedestrian crossing at Boone Street will include rapid flashing beacons there on Boone. Okay, in the preliminary alignment near the Sequoia Park section, this section will be designed and constructed within the existing built environment. Minimal changes to the travel lanes and on-street parking. Widened sidewalks within the public right-of-way where feasible to improve the walking experience in this popular walking area. And the one-way couplet is not a consideration here.
Also a lot of ADA improvements along the route as far as driveway aprons and curb ramps to kind of level things out there.
What's one-way couple?
It was a project that was proposed a couple years ago to have one-way traffic around the zoo. Okay, what is next for the Beta Zoo Trail? The city is negotiating a contract with GHD for design services.
GHD?
GHD,
It's a consulting firm.
the consulting firm, yeah. Once in contract, 60% design and mitigation planning will begin. The city is in contract with Bender Rosenthal for professional right-of-way services. These two services will run concurrently and will require close communication and outreach with impacted property owners. These phases are expected to last 9 to 12 months, with construction beginning not until 2027, and ongoing outreach and communication with the public and impacted residents. Brief overview on the professional right-of-way services. The Caltrans right-of-way phase in general involves acquiring land and easements necessary for transportation projects, encompassing activities like preparing right-of-way plans, utility relocations, appraisals, and payments for real property. The city must follow the Caltrans right-of-way manual and has retained a professional right-of-way consultant, which is Bender Rosenthal. This is an extremely structured process that will include conversations and negotiations with property owners. Bender Rosenthal will provide a certified general appraiser and licensed real estate broker to work with the city, GHD, our design consultant, and Caltrans to perform appraisals in coordination of right-of-way for properties on the trail alignment. This phase will move along as the trail design is solidified.
Will there be eminent domain, or will it be negotiated in the people's rights?
We'll go into that a little bit more. Yes.
Important question.
Excuse me, I have a real quick question. Do you have a picture, do you have a map that shows the section from Boone, that you can get from Boone to Harris? Is it the
We
one
covered
that's
that, right?
on that map?
It kind of was at the edge of the map.
This is Boone, and Harris. Oh, it's here. It'll go up on Russ Street to Dolbeer. There.
Is that end of like T streets? Is that it?
What's up?
What streets are down there? Is that a T street?
Russ.
This is Russ and Dolbeer. Okay, this is a overview of the right-of-way process provided by Bender Rosenthal. Starts with planning and design, community outreach, moving on to appraisal process, which includes the notice of decision to appraise, inspection with property owners, and independent appraisal review, just compensation, a prepared first written offer for property owners. Then we'll go into negotiations between vendor Rosenthal and the property owners, the right-of-way contract and escrow process, and then possession, which would allow for city to begin construction. The right-of-way certification is more of a Caltrans requirement to make sure that we followed all the processes. And a little bit on trail safety. I received a lot of questions. The majority of them were around trail safety. The Eureka Police Department has been involved in early conversations about the Beta Zoo Trail. The city is planning and preparing for patrol of additional 2 miles of trail. Crime prevention through environmental design will be used during the design process with feedback from EPD. And trail access points for emergencies will be carefully considered during the design. This is the end of my presentation. My contact information is on here. This QR code will get you to our story map website. And again, this is the website link as well to get you to the copy of this presentation as well as all of the questions that we received. Next up, Supervisor Natalie Arroyo is going to do a quick presentation. Then we will go into the question and answer period. So we will make sure we can try to hear everyone as possible.
Awesome. This information is also on those postcards that are, I believe, right, Brittany?
Yes.
Correct. Brittany has to switch slideshows. I swear I'll be quick. I just want to tell you a little bit about my research into trails and perception of safety. So I actually did my master's thesis on this topic, and I used 2 examples of trails in Humboldt County, in part because I wanted to understand more about people's perceptions of safety when they live near a trail, have a business near a trail, or use a trail regularly right here in Humboldt County. So I asked these questions about Humboldt County community members and how they perceive their safety on or near trails, what factors affect this, and how these perceptions affect the ways that people use and value trails. Do I have a slide advancer? Do I just do it with my mind? Okay, perfect. And I'm not going to go into, obviously, my entire thesis here. Sadly, I would love to talk to you about it. I love talking about it. It is available to the public, and I can get back to you if you're interested in reading the whole thing. So I studied the Hammond and the Hickory Trail, and part of the reason for selecting these 2 was that the Hickory had a long history of safety problems near the trail, predating the trail being there. It's part of a greater trail network and heavily used for both transportation and recreation. So both of these trails are used for people to get to and from places they need to go, as well as to recreate. The Hammond Trail, I specifically focused on the portion of the trail that lies behind people's homes and near community parks, because I thought that might offer some insight into the interactions that people have with all the different folks using the trail. So some takeaways, a pretty significant majority of the people I surveyed, and I did what are called intercept surveys, where I talked to people on the trail, but I also interviewed people who have homes and businesses nearby. So I got both trail users, park users, and then folks who live or work near the trails or have businesses near them. So the majority were using the trail for recreation and wellness purposes. Majority were older than 51. And a lot of folks who stopped to take the survey, and there may be a little survey bias here, but felt they were really engaged in decisions about infrastructure in their community. And I got 198 unique responses, which is pretty good for this type of survey.
Could you speak up a little, please?
Speak up? Okay, sure. People here are going to really feel me. All right, and I'll try to aim towards you. So I did ask a question that I wanted to pull out just a couple of answers. You probably can't all read this, but I asked how people defined safety in their own words, because that's very relative for people. So, many people focused on their personal safety from crime or from harm imposed by other people. But quite a few people also talked about not having an accident where they're hit by a car. The kind of conditions that lead them to feel safe, like having a large number of people around or having a dog with them. So people talked about what conditions make them feel safe as part of their definition. There were hundreds, 198 definitions of safety, but they were kind of interesting to see how varied they were. So again, if you'd like to delve into that, you're welcome to. Then we have Chuck Norris here on the bottom who said safety is strictly self-confidence in your ability to defend yourself. So, very wide array of responses. Also, people talked about the trail conditions, like that the surfacing might, and the condition of the trail and the maintenance would make them feel more or less safe. So in total, here were the responses. The mean for the Hickshari Trail was lower than the Hammond Trail. So the blue represents the Hammond Trail and the kind of reddish represents the Hickshari Trail and the total number of responses received. I will also note, I think I took this slide out, but the Hammond has almost twice as many users as the Hickshari Trail. I didn't ask people to compare the two, but there's some distinct differences in how long the trail has been there, how affluent the neighborhood is, a number of other factors too. I did also interview folks in law enforcement, government, residents living near the trail, nonprofit service providers, community volunteers, business owners, and I did 15 very in-depth interviews. So out of those, the majority of people described the trail as safe, and it was seen as very variable and contextual. So one person said, I never felt unsafe, but I had to keep my guard up more. So there were certainly, changes in how people saw safety in that regard too. The vast majority of people felt that the trail was really valuable or important. They were also very, very likely to bring people that they care about to the trails. So I thought that was interesting. It was actually even a higher rating than people's own personal perception of safety. They were like, I feel like mostly safe, but I would really recommend my friends and family come. So it was very interesting as a finding. So the things that really, when I boiled it all down, the things that mattered most for people's feeling of safety was other users' presence and behavior. So actually having other people on the trail. So most folks, really got into like, I feel safe when there are other people here using the trail appropriately. And that volume of people was what helped them feel safe. And of course, the behavior of those other people. And then the physical condition of the trail. In the Hickshari's case, it was largely trash that got called out or, vandalism. And in the case of the Hammond, it was vegetation maintenance. And I can imagine for this alignment we're talking about, it would probably be a lot of both of those categories that would factor in for people. So unleashed dogs is another thing that happened to come up quite a lot, as did bicyclist behavior and the feeling of safety with bicyclists passing one another. So visible trash, vandalism, dense vegetation, those are all management issues that, I'm sure we'll talk about here today. 95% of Hammond Trail users said they felt safe on the trail, and 82% of Hickshari Trail users felt safe, and that's above that mean, at or above that mean. And 80% of the people responded that they would use it for transportation and not just recreation. So that is one of the things that these projects are aimed at, is increasing transportation options for people. So again, I have a lot more data in the document itself. I actually fought a friendly battle with my advisor to keep in a lot of historical information and information from around the nation, around the world about trail safety from studies all over the place. And so it's in there, intended to be utilized by folks who have thoughts and concerns about trail safety. So I thought I'd bring it up, and maybe we can share a link to it or something if people would like to read it in more detail. So that's just a primer on some of the findings I had, and I think we'll get into the panel now. Yep.
Thank you, Natalie. So like I said, we received a ton of questions. I grouped them into different categories. Natalie's going to help facilitate. We have a panel of people that will take turns answering them. We'll do our best to go through as many as we can, and then we will also want to open it up to hear from you all. So bear with us while we go through some of these and see how it goes.
All right, sounds good. So I'm going to ask some of the questions that were submitted. Do you guys want to come over here? I don't know who's. We don't have to sit down, but maybe people can hear us better if we don't sit.
Yeah.
I think some of the folks in the back, can you hear us better if we're not seated? Okay. I'm going to be like really screaming at you. All right, so what are the noise assessments of the walkways and bridges over sensitive marsh areas, and what are the impacts to habitat of wetland and of wetlands and nearby residents?
so combo. From a design standpoint, we will be looking at multiple. So we haven't gotten to the point of like picking what kind of materials we're going to be using for bridges or boardwalks. I think this question probably stems from what we have out on the Eureka Waterfront Trail with those existing aluminum boardwalks. There's pluses and minuses to every material you're looking at when it comes to structures. In that case, out there, those are very lightweight, which allows for a very small impact in that marsh system that it runs through when we're talking about the Eureka Waterfront Trail. For this project, though, we'll be looking at different materials. I know in different trails around the region, there's concrete is definitely one option out there, asphalt, depending on how the bed's laid. So we'll be looking at those from a standpoint of the construction of the bridge. From the standpoint of the environmental impact side of things, I don't know, Katie, if you want to talk a little bit about like the process that we went through with NEPA and like the studies that we did.
Question.
Or
I'm
maybe
wondering
we
if
do,
our
sorry.
panel leader has a follow-up question.
There is a follow-up question that I think could tee off your response. Is the city planning to redo CEQA once it has a final alignment? So CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. So that dictates a process for looking at environmental impacts.
Okay, I'm gonna shout. I have a loud voice. So how's that? Is it working back there? Okay, good. I can't always stand. I can't multitask. We'll see. I'm gonna sit. But my name is Katie, and I do have a background working in parks and trails and working in some kind of sensitive natural habitat settings. I had the opportunity to work on the Elk River Estuary project that you might be familiar with on the very south end of town. So there are a lot of requirements for this project or any project that the city takes on because so much of our surroundings are beautiful, beautiful habitat areas. And so this project does cover a number of what we call SNCs or sensitive natural communities. And those include a lot of our coastal areas and our salt marsh areas. Those include the riparian or the McFarland Creek sections along with the redwood areas. And so some of the questions that came up about environmental are related to the extent of studies, or will we reopen studies, or how will that be, folded into the design components as well. So just to give you a bit of an overview, we do look at special status plants in each of those SNCs, the sensitive natural communities. We look at special status species. We also look at more common species. So if you ever have an interest, the entire what's called ISMND, which is the initial study negative declaration, it's a mouthful, is all available. And then, we look at ways where we might have impacts along the alignment that was shown and what we could do to also improve habitat in those areas. And so side by side with construction for this project, we do have mitigation components that will be implemented. We will expand wetlands. We will remove some old remnant and historic fill areas in some of the coastal areas. And we're trying to do that work in tandem with thoughtful design where we might have areas that maybe folks are able to hide or there's not very good visibility. If we can do a restoration piece that creates improved habitat for wildlife, but also reduces hiding areas along the trail and makes people feel safe, that's a double benefit, right, with the design. So looking at mitigation in our coastal areas, and then also looking at ways along our wetland and riparian corridors that we can really look at the sensitive communities that are there. We will be required to address willow and red alder through a planting program. So a lot of the riparian corridor components, and then also a full redwood palette kind of planting and establishment. So there will be a number of acres of restoration that are linked to this project. The other analysis that happens is called the area of potential effect, the APE. And so some of our maps, if you really want to dig in a little closer, the assessment areas span a much broader width than just the trail. The trail might be, we look at 20 feet, and the broader area of potential effect is a much kind of a span of areas around the trail. So when we think about wildlife, right, they might be affected from something that's 50 feet away or 100 feet away. And those are the types of impacts that were analyzed. And this was analyzed under CEQA, which is California's, all of our set of policies, and then also through NEPA, which is the national environmental set of policies. So there's some of the studies. that I wanted to address. The question was if, let's see, if we would redo CEQA, but the way that that set of policies is lined out is that we opened all those studies, we reported on those, and if we had to amend them, we would look at that again and say, is it different? Do we have to amend it? And that would be a public process. So I don't know that we're intending to reopen it. We tried to study as much as possible, but there is a method for doing that. And then, yes, we also looked at, which I didn't comment on, a lot of historic structures or settings or changes to viewshed, anything that has an impact, any type of former tribal or cultural resource was assessed, soils were assessed, even any other kind of uses across the lands that might have left hazardous materials. Like, we had to really vet the whole variety of studies. So all of that info is available, and I hope that answers
No, it's great.
that question. Okay.
Thank you. How will you keep homeowners safe from people accessing their yards and residences from the trail? Presumably unwanted people.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think we deal with this right now in the residential areas. Most cities in Eureka have alleys that run behind people's homes, which are less visibility for those that travel the roads. So there's an avenue already for this type of activity to take place. So it falls on our patrol officers. It falls on our community to report certain areas of the city where we call hotspots, where we see an increase in crime that's being reported. So then we can focus our enforcement efforts in those areas and try to address those problems, move those problems out. So typically our response for that type of approach to the trail will be pretty much the same. We have rangers that are on 7 days a week. So we have 2 full-time sworn rangers that cover the trails right now 7 days a week in the parks. And we have a community service officer ranger, which is a non-sworn position that also is responsible for patrolling that area. I saw one of the other questions, is there a possibility in the future or a need that we might have to increase our staffing to cover the additional miles of trails that we have, not only this Beta Zoo, but we also have the extension that's going to go to Arcata. I mean, there's nothing off the table, I think. And I wish I had a magic 8 ball and tell you what's going to happen in 2027 in Humboldt County and where we're going to be as a city. I don't. And I think when we look at the trail system as a whole, when we built the Hickory Trail and the Waterfront Trail, we had no idea we'd be running into the issues maybe that we're running into now, right? So we have an idea, we put something in place, and now we see it manifest change just like the environment does. And we have to stay flexible and we approach that from different avenues just based on our society and what we're facing at the time. And that's what we'll do with this trail system as well.
There were quite a lot of questions about encampments and how to respond, how to prevent them, how to report them should they form. So could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think this area is going to be a little more unique than like the Hickory Trail. We have people that use Hickory Trail mainly for recreation. This is going to be in a residential area, partly through a residential area, where there will be more eyes on the trail. There will be more ability for people to report the suspicious activity a whole lot quicker to us. There is no time frame that somebody's allowed to camp. Once you see something suspicious, you can report it. We can address it immediately. Camping is still illegal in the city of Eureka. We can address it through different avenues that we already have access to, and that's what we do. If an encampment is set up, we have to give so much notice before we remove that encampment, and that's 48 hours. But the idea with having more eyes on the trail in an area where suspicious activity can be reported quicker, we don't have people getting embedded in our green belts. We don't have people getting embedded along the trails, and those are much harder for us to deal with because the larger cleanups come with those places that are allowed to be there for a longer period of time, gather more trash, gather more junk, and then we have to remove all that stuff. So I think this is going to be a little bit more unique than the Waterfront Trail where we have people out there, but you don't have eyes on it all the time because it's used more for recreation.
Will there ever be a meeting just for residents specifically? Maybe you all want to speak
Yeah,
to that?
I think there will be individual meetings with residents along the trail who are going to be impacted by the trail alignment. If there's a proposal for a trail segment to go over a property through our right-of-way process, outside of just city staff contacting and trying to keep people in the loop, There's going to be a very formalized process that Brittany went through in the presentation of contact and exchange of information and negotiation, and it's going to be a pretty in-depth process. So that's as far as like individual property owners along the trail who are impacted by the trail. That'll be.
But what about a group meeting?
There's certainly opportunities for group meetings between now and then.
There was a couple questions in here about emergency medical rescue and fire response.
So yeah, so most of the trails right now have markers on them that allow us to know roughly where you are. So there's things out there that can identify the trail. You can give us the number on the concrete that's painted on there, or a bridge or a sign, and we're putting more of that stuff out on the waterfront trail. We're going to identify some more common areas for us with signage that allows you to know where you're at. So if you need assistance and you say I'm at the bridge at the foot of T, then we know exactly what bridge you're standing on. This trail, I think, is unique in that it's going to be wider in places than the Hickory, in that we can get patrol cars down a lot of this trail. We can get ambulances actually onto the trail if we need to do rescues and not have to truck people all the way back out to an access point. And that's just as simple as pulling the bollards, which we usually have the keys for, at least our rangers and CSET team will have the keys for. So we can pull those bollards immediately and get emergency services down onto the trail. We haven't gone public with this. We're testing it internally, but there is a process with an app you can put on your phone, and it's called What 3 Words, I think is what it's called. And it's an international identification coordinates identification app where anywhere in the world you can be standing. You open this app, you have your location on, and you push "Where am I?" and it'll give you 3 words. It might be like red, white, and blue. Well, we put that red, white, and blue into our system, which we already have, has the capabilities then to shoot us a set of coordinates, and on our map we can pinpoint exactly where you are. So we're testing this internally among our CSET team, those that are out on our rangers that are out on the trails, and if it seems to work and it seems to be accurate and it works well, then this is something we're going to push out publicly to our community, because we think it's a whole lot easier if you're injured and you can't think about what the last bridge you passed or where you're at on the trail. But if you can open that app and push a button and say, "Where am I?" and give me 3 words, I can pinpoint your coordinates on a map and send you medical aid or whatever assistance you need immediately. So there are other things we're working on as well to try to help reduce our response time to locations along the trails to get assistance to anybody using those.
There were a few questions about alleviating parking issues on Russ as well as on Harris and adjacent to the hospital, recognizing that there's hospital employees and visitors to the hospital that park there. So some questions around parking and how to address parking issues in that portion of the project area.
Yeah, so, excuse me. I think parking, is clearly, it's a very hot topic across the city of Eureka. In this trail, kind of more so than the waterfront trail or the Humboldt Bay Trail, the upper portion is more of that residential setting versus that like regional, trail opportunity to go, drive your car to, take your bike and go get on the trail, go south through Eureka, go north. Pretty soon here you'll be able to go north to Arcata along the Humboldt Bay Trail. So in the project, we have identified a parking area at Merlin McFarland that we're working towards, where you could have more of that access if you want to get on, take your car, or get off the bus there and get on the trail and go. In the residential areas, we're not expecting that to be like this regional, like destination for people to go. It's more, those are your neighborhood access to get on the trail, to go places that you want to go, to get around the city. And then, understanding there are challenges with the parking at the hospital, but we don't foresee there being a large, shift in how that parking is in that area. And while that's already a challenging area, and we certainly wouldn't want to have a big thing. McFarland and Boone.
The parking along Boone and along McFarland, I would anticipate that.
Yeah, there is existing parking along there now.
Right, well, it's gonna be like car parking in those places.
Yeah, there's, public parking is still going to be available for folks to park on the street. So those are available for anybody. Again, we're not forecasting that there's going to be a huge amount of people driving into neighborhoods trying to get on the trail from those areas, from like coming out of the area to go to this trail.
There's some questions about safe crossing on Harris and Dolbeer. There were 3 or 4 around that topic. Could you speak to the design for safe crossing of Harris at Dolbeer and that area?
Sure, we have two. One important thing to keep in mind with this trail is it's going along the Second Slough Gulch. If you are familiar with Eureka, you know that we have a series of gulches and greenways that cross the city. And we have very few streets that actually bisect the city east to west. You have Myrtle, starting at the north, you have Myrtle, that goes all the way across all the gulches. Coming back, you have Boone, you have, or Booner, however you pronounce it, and then you have Harris. Those are like your 3 major thoroughfares to get back and forth across the city. There's no other great options there. So that really puts a lot of volume of traffic on those roadways, and we're proposing to have a trail go through this greenway. So we're very cognizant of how important safety is at these locations. So that's kind of the impetus behind a roundabout going in at McFarland and Myrtle. The idea there being to really create a high visibility crossing for any for pedestrians to be very visible to vehicles coming through there, and to also slow down the vehicular traffic that would be going through Myrtle along that alignment. The same thing, not so much as a roundabout, a high visibility crossing at Boone and the trail. In this case, there'll be a median. What we're proposing right now in the preliminary design is a median island. The pedestrian activated rapid flashing beacons. We have a few of those around town. That's where you walk up and you can activate it. It flashes a light to alert the vehicles that there's somebody at the crossing that's using the crossing. The elevated curb in that median in the middle. There'll be bulb outs on the side. So it'll really neck down that corridor through there. So people aren't going to feel, you know, if you're hitting through the Boone Street dip, you know, that trying to hit 70 miles an hour isn't going to feel as comfortable anymore because you're going to have a really constrained roadway there. And then, you know, the high visibility crossing. Similar thing at Harris. Currently, there's the activated beacon there. We're going to put in a much more illuminated beacon there, and also with the median treatments. And, you know, as much as we can to really like bring attention to those locations, both so that the pedestrians can see the vehicles and the vehicles can see the pedestrians. Everybody's aware of what's going on there. So that's kind of those 3 areas.
I think kind of reading the room, I think I might ask just a couple more and then maybe we can transition to opening it up. There was a question about like are these questions going to be available for everyone to see? And before we get to our last 2, maybe you want to.
Yeah, like I said, they're all going to be available on our website on that link there. They'll all be there. The recording of this will be available on our YouTube as well. And if you leave this meeting feeling like you really have a lot more questions, I'm always available. Call me, email me, and I'll get back to you. We want to help answer as many questions as possible. We know this is a popular topic, and you know there's a lot of people that are impacted. So we want to hear from you. We want to answer those questions. So if you don't feel like you got your questions answered tonight, feel free to reach out.
So we'll do a couple more and then open it up to the room, and I'll stop talking at you. So do you have the dedicated budget and equipment for maintenance?
Is that you, Robin? We got Robin here.
Yeah.
Perfect.
The community services department is committed to a full-time trail maintenance person for this new trail. Of course, without it being constructed, that'll be a few years from now, so we can only dedicate budgets annually, but that is the commitment and plan.
Nice. There were a couple questions about ADA accessibility on this trail and the design being ADA accessible.
Yeah, excuse me. The majority of the trail is relatively flat until you get to the section going south of Boone. It gets very hilly through that section. So our intent is to create as much with the trail segment. We're going to have some pretty significant design challenges when it comes to the area between Boone and Russ in order to get that trail segment up to where it needs to go. But that's our job, and that's our dedication there to make sure that that trail is accessible. It might be a couple different options. Our conceptual design right now has kind of a steeper pathway, and then it also has a more accessible pathway. So there's a couple different options. If you just want to zoom and go and be on a steep portion of the trail, you'll have that option. If you need to have some switchbacks with landings and to meet those standards, those will be available for you as well. One part of the trail we haven't talked a lot about because it's not really a trail, but the section going south of Russ along Dolbeer, That section, what we're intending to do there is, again, try to widen those sidewalks as much as possible within the right of way. There's not like a ton of space everywhere, but, you know, trying to make those sidewalks as wide and comfortable as possible. There's a lot of driveways and ramps in there that are not accessible. They don't meet ADA requirements, so we'll be repairing those and trying to make a clear, accessible path through that area, the Miracle Mile, that Dolbeer and W loop there.
Well, thanks for letting me join and ask questions. I'll step aside, but I do just want to say one more thing because it's kind of weighing on my heart right now. I knew the bicyclist who was killed this month here in Eureka, and that person was a really amazing community member who I valued very much and who biked everywhere because that was their mode of transportation. So without casting blame on who was responsible or any of the circumstances of that collision, I just want to say when I think about these projects and how difficult they are, they're difficult, they're expensive. I was on the council when this was approved, so if there's any frustration, you can also point it at me. Scott's taking the heat now, but you know, I was sitting in that seat before. It weighs really heavily on me as a community member who loves the city so much when we have loss of life of people who are just more vulnerable users of our roadways. So thanks for taking that into account. And by no means does that mean that your concerns aren't, you know, important to me, and I know they're important to the city. So thanks for everybody for coming out.
Okay, so it's about what time? 6:30. We have some time for questions. First hand I saw there.
So when you leave the Zane Lower Field area and you cross Booner, can you talk about where the trail goes then?
Heading to,
I'm showing the map.
yeah, switch
Pull the
to
map back up.
Oh yeah, I can switch.
And while Brittany's doing that, I will say, you know, we also, I'm not sure what you guys are interested in. We can do this kind of forum section of questions. We're also more than willing to, you know, we can break it up and, you know, we can wander around and ask questions, have more conversational type interactions as well, if you're interested in that. This is a good way to get questions out there, but I also understand it's nice to also have a conversation and talk about concerns or anything you might have questions about. So that's an option as well.
I have a question about how you feel the environmental impacts of this project work with the gulches and greenways, because I am seeing a lot of conflict in what I'm being asked to do as a landowner and how careful I'm being asked to be, which I'm completely fine with the environment around my property. And I don't feel the same care is being given to the gully behind the house at all. And Katie, I don't know if Katie works for the city, but as far as the ISMND, I was really involved when you guys were doing all of that stuff. I don't see anywhere where it's mentioned where they're gonna go across, by our property and they're gonna go in and make an additional, entryway there. There's nothing about crossing the braided creek there. There's nothing about any of that stuff. So, there's nothing about the fact we have Pacific lamprey up there. As a matter of fact, they told us that we didn't. We have lots of sightings of them. And we've had people on the Eureka City website tell people that live there that have seen them with their eyes that they didn't see what they thought they saw. So, I mean, that's...
Yeah, I think I can, you know, like, Brittany, thank you for pulling up the map. This kind of shows a general alignment, difficult to read, so I'll try to walk you through it. But currently, I think to answer your question about crossing the creek, I think here the intent is to, you know, almost on the entire alignment from Zane up through to Russ is to stay more on the eastern side of the creek, of the stream bed there. There's one crossing, well, it's not actually a crossing in the main channel, but there's a side channel that comes in down on the south end of Zane. We'll have like a bridge, or there could be a boardwalk section that goes along there that, because it's pretty, there's a lot of wetland area right in that zone there. So we might elevate the trail above that to allow for that that surface or groundwater movement to maintain, and also for, you know, any frogs or critters that want to move around through there, to be able to do that. So that's probably why, you know, our intent is not to so much get into the creek channel, especially up in this zone here.
Just related to all that, just as far as school safety, I know you say, oh, it's open during school hours, but now that there'll be a main trail on there, just people with mental illness, and we have a lot of it around here, everybody can say what they want, but with the school being open, and that's my concern. So there is stuff that happens on the trail. So if you could tell us how we would be, or where it would be.
Yeah, I'll try to use this.
Where the fence is up there.
Yeah, so yeah, this is the Zane campus here. We're somewhere over here. And the trail again on the east side over here. This picture, this photograph that Brittany provided here, is down here at the star looking to the south. So it's, you know, here looking kind of up this direction here. So you see there's an elevation gain, there's a fence line at the top that goes up to the campus where the actual Zane campus is. And then there's this access road here that accesses from the school down to the field down here. And the discussions we've had with the school district is about providing more fencing up here at the top of this access gate, that could be controlled by the district, by the staff here, as far as allowing that gate to be open or closed during the school hours. So that would provide, because right now it's just, you know, like a 1-bar gate that swings there, so anybody can kind of walk through there. Being able to fence across that and have like a gate that vehicles could go through, but also having a vehicle that people could cross through. So that way, you know, kids coming to school, you could open it during, you know, drop off or dismissal, and they could come and go during that. But it would also kind of provide more of a, you know, it would stop folks from coming on, I guess, during times that you wouldn't want them to. But, you know, it's fencing. It's never going to be perfect. If somebody wants to jump a fence, be able to, or if they're going to want to go, like, you know, through the wilderness to try to get onto campus, there's only so much you can do.
Would it interfere with like the sports fields down there? You know, it's kind of, I know they're not fully being used, but they're good football.
Yeah, the intent is to try to stay out of the, you know, to allow for the soccer field to not be impacted by the trail, that it'll be pushed far enough to the side there that it wouldn't impact that. That's our goal right now.
Chief, do you have anything to comment on, just from your experience, trails and safety and students?
Well, I mean, almost no school in the city of Eureka is completely fenced or locked down right now at all. I think Washington is probably the one that has the most security, as far as once school is in, the door's locked, it's entirely fenced. So this is an issue that does occur occasionally at campuses throughout the city, but it's also one that we don't respond to very often. And school campuses are usually pretty good about dealing with individuals that come on and de-escalating those and getting them off. So I don't see an increase in, could it happen? Of course it could happen, but I don't see an increase in that being an issue for us. Plus, this trail runs to an area where there aren't a lot of resources on this side of town for individuals like there is along the Hickory Trail, along the Old Town area down there. There's a lot more opportunities for crime because of the retail stores and things we have. There's also a lot more opportunities for resources. That's why they stay in those areas. They don't have the capabilities to travel long distances, don't want to travel long distances. So the convenience of being down there is much more than it's going to be up here, where there's not as many resources for them just to walk out and go to free meal or do what they need to do to get through the day. So who knows in 2027 where that'll be, what resources we'll have and where they'll be. But now looking, forecasting, just don't see that being quite the same issue, or at least maybe a different type of issue up here than it will be in the Old Town, Hickory, Waterfront Trail area.
I just wanted to mention, this area where the picture's taken is already publicly accessible from either like a dog park or from McFarland through that little walkway thing. It's like I run through here, and so I don't see that being more of a change. If there was an official trail, it's already accessible.
Yeah, there's a little trail spur here. There's a sidewalk through this zone here, and then there's the dog parks up here, and there's a little access point there. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, almost every time we've come out and checked it out, there's been people using that field with their dogs, and it's pretty public space. what's.
Yep.
I think I heard a statement about widening the sidewalks in the Dolbeer Street area. Did you say that?
Correct.
Could you get into that a little more? I think with bicycles, more bicycles joining the traffic, the cars in the street, you would want to narrow the sidewalks to give more passage safety to the bicycles. Tell me where the conflict is.
No, good point. Those sidewalks up there, they get a lot of use and they're relatively narrow. I think they're 5 feet sidewalks. They're not quite 6. There is some additional space there on the sidewalk, not a ton in some locations.
Well, not to interrupt you, but used by whom? Bicycles?
No. The intent for the sidewalk is for pedestrians, cyclists in the roadway. In this case, they'd be sharing the roadway with vehicles in the bicycle boulevard, signage and striping, not necessarily separated facilities. Of course, we're going to get into that design more so, but that's currently kind of where it's at right now. So keeping the cyclists and pedestrians separated.
As a follow-up to that question, I own the property on Dolbeer and Russ, and I can say that the hospital parking situation in that neighborhood, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, is out of control. And if you're gonna, I disagree with the statement that you made that you won't have additional parking. It may not be Monday through Friday because there's not any access availability there, but on the weekends it is. There's nobody can park in front of their own home if they go out right now and come back. And if you're widening the sidewalks, I assume you're gonna widen from Russ south to Dolbeer and not north, or not north of Russ Street towards the church?
Correct. These would be going towards, heading south towards,
You already have 100% occupancy on parking. You're gonna widen the sidewalk. Are you gonna take the additional widening from the individual property owners, or are you gonna go into the street? Because you've got semis going down there, you've got the bus route there, you already have a really congested point of turning with the median restriction on Dolbeer and Harris. It's a traffic issue, and if you narrow that, the traffic's not reducing here. And I think and I put this in my question here, is I think you as the city and you as Scott need to talk to the hospital and get them to talk to the serious negotiations with the church. The church has 102 parking spots there. And or mandate that Providence put in a parking structure prior to this occurring here, because it's a problem and it's impacting that neighborhood significantly. And this trail is only gonna accentuate the negative aspects of that parking on those adjacent property owners. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Just to answer one of your questions there about where the sidewalk will go, we're gonna be opportunistic about where sidewalk could be widened, and the intent is not to push it into the roadway more, but there are some areas where there is still some additional right-of-way or sidewalk area at the back of sidewalk. Typically, it's not a lot, maybe a foot or so, but being able to kind of widen some of those areas, which will help with that accessible pathway with some of the driveways where they're very steep driveway cuts along the way. But
Just to do that also on Russ Street?
Where available, there is a section of proposed on Russ between Dolbeer down to where it takes that hard 90. There's a section on the south side that doesn't have any sidewalks, so there will be a filling of that, adding sidewalk in that area through there to connect up to the existing section.
North side of Russ Street.
West
of Dolbeer.
Yeah, I think
on my property, it's got a steep driveway and a bank, a rock wall there.
Yeah.
And if you take that and widen it out of my property, you've destroyed and that's a historical or identifiable, not a historical.
Yeah, no, it's not a blanket. We'll have to look at the design, and where it's not reasonable, we won't be doing that. Yeah.
What is the proposed width of the right-of-way, the path, in the area between Booner and the area the gentleman was talking about, kind of the Dolbeer Russ area? That can be like 5 feet, 20 feet, what's the proposed width? And then the follow-up to that is, are you any consideration given to keeping out the electric bikes or the electric scooters that go through at 25 miles an hour and hit people and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'll answer the first part of the question as far as the width and everything, and then I'll turn it over to the chief to talk about the electric bikes and that sort of thing.
Width first.
Got it.
Electric bikes.
Yeah. So, this is a class 1 trail facility that that's the intention of this trail. There's requirements for the width of that trail. So, and there's also, so in the minimum that you can have is a 8-foot wide paved trail with 2-foot shoulders on it. And those shoulders could be either compacted base rock or they could be paved. So that generally puts your trail at about 12 feet, right? And then there might be easement needed for slope easements or those sorts of things, where you're to get your trail embankment to fit with the grades. So that's generally what the width of the trail would be. In some cases, if we can go wider, that's generally a thing we like to do because it provides more of a comfortable comfort on the trail for different users. It opens up the space a little bit more. If we can pave those shoulders, it just provides more area for folks to be on there. It allows it for easier access for emergency vehicles if they need to get in there. So that's generally the goal there. But I'll turn over the question about e-bikes.
Yeah, we had this conversation actually in our department heads meeting with the city manager this morning because we know it's becoming more and more of an issue, and we're seeing in other large cities where they're having significant pedestrian versus e-bike collisions on these types of trails. I believe, and I know there's some signage we're going to put out, some things we're going to look at, but there are certain levels. I think there's 5 levels of e-bikes, and there's certain types of e-bikes that are not allowed on trail systems. So this is a whole new realm for all of us, trying to get a grip on what's allowed by the vehicle code, what's not allowed, what's allowed on trails, not allowed. But I'll tell you, it's right now our rangers are pushing this because they're seeing more and more issues on the trails, and we're trying to come up with a solution for the city that we can actually enforce and would make it better for everyone. So it's in the works is what I can tell you, and by the time this comes around, we'll have a solution. We may be having hovering bicycles by the time 2027 rolls around, so maybe a whole new issue, but yes, it is. We're working on it right now and trying to address the issue because we see it increasing. We know it's going to become very problematic in the near future.
And I think too that the county, Arcata, the county especially, they're finishing up their segment there. I know they're tackling it. I think there's going to be some of those, they're going to go first, so to speak, and we'll be able to kind of play off of them, especially with our existing facilities on the waterfront. But it's a regional effort there to try to come up with consistency with those regulations.
Is there, I have 12 questions, I guess I'm not gonna be allowed to do that. But, is there, in the budget for cleaning up effluent, camps, needles, sort of thing? I'm not a nut against these people, please believe me, but we've just seen it. We've seen it on Big Shari, we've seen it in all the greenways, we've seen the gigantic loads going out. And also, what about insurance? And what if a fire starts down there and a lot of the neighbors lose their houses? Do you feel that the city will face any kind of litigious backlash if that were to happen? Also, I didn't get an answer on the eminent domain question. So if a person lives along there and they say, no, I don't want the trail to go through, I'm not going to, are they going to prevail? Or will the city pull in their eminent domain and say, well, sorry, we appraised it, we will give you this much money? This is just some of the few questions I had. I'm not worried about my own safety on the trail, but I am concerned about the children. And I think a lot of people here are.
Well, I can answer the first question, Del, about resources, right? Cleanup resources. I mean, we have maintenance workers who actually have to do some of that cleanup. But if we can prevent the encampments from happening, it's not an issue, right? And that's where people come in, and we're getting calls, police are getting calls. We can stop the encampment before it happens.
All over the other trails already, and now you're talking, and it's not being mitigated sufficiently. You're talking about it, 2.5 miles of trail. And so I'm trying to see the good reason why suddenly it's going to be effective.
Well, I understand, Dale, but I think what we're talking about too, like is what the chief was saying about resources. The reason the Hicksari is such a problem hotspot is because it's close to resources. It's close to free meal. It's close to the mission. And so it's more, you know, if you're in that position of life, it's closer to where you can access the resources you
This trail
need.
starts by the Adorning Center.
What's that?
This trail starts by the Adorning Center.
Yeah, it starts by the Adorning, but Hicksari is over there behind the sewer.
On the Adorning Trail, it was a lot of homeless people there, God bless them.
And that's what I'm
We had
saying.
People who were kind of intimidating.
Yeah, I totally get you.
Maybe guy who please call his father's dog.
Yeah, I know. But what we're
So it's not very far from the Adorning Center to Zane.
So this trail, if I may,
Go ahead.
this trail's gonna hook in behind,
Pardon the shade.
yeah, this trail's gonna hook in behind Open Door. So at the very end of the trail, so way up from the Adorning Center. So this trail's gonna hook in up there. It's my understanding some of the way the trail is gonna be built and some of that problem area we have right there off of behind Open Door, Dowler, that area where there's some encampments in there, some long-term encampments in there. Taking some of that fill out and removing some of that is going to create a wetland in there and restore that environmental area, we hope, and which will make it unlikely to be able to camp in water, right? I mean, that's the idea. So if we can change the environment to keep the camps out of certain areas that we already have a problem with, then that removes the need for the resources to go in and clean up the needles, the trash, all the other stuff we deal with on a daily basis. So is it going to work everywhere? No, but some of the more problematic areas that we have already identified, I think we can make some changes with what they're looking at doing in the design phase that may have a positive impact on that and resolve some of that for us just by the creation of the trail. Now,
There were
so
a couple of other questions.
Anybody else?
Insurance.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. The last one question, or can I go? So I live on McFarland, and there is a resource thing for the homeless people, which is the mini mart. And there's a fair amount of homeless traffic now, and it can be a problem with mentally ill people. So I was wondering, I'm worried about safety at night of people, you know, once the public's gone, and even when the public's there, because they're there on all the other trails, there's gonna be homeless people that use that, come up easier with bicycles and things, to come up the trail and camp for the night, and then I'm worried about what is gonna be done to make the trail safer at night for the residents that line that, trail.
There's a couple things along the way. Lighting is certainly something that we're anticipating. Now, we may not light the entire corridor, but lighting areas where it makes sense is something that we're definitely looking at through the design down around Zane. That's one avenue there. I don't know, Chief, if you have any other add there?
yeah, I would just fall back to my previous answer that, you know, come nighttime, we deal with this issue across the city where people have access to people's yards and we rely on people to report a lot of that stuff. When you see this suspicious activity, let us know. Even if we don't catch the people in the act, if we put patrol cars in the area looking, then they know somebody in that area is actually paying attention at night around their residence, around their neighborhood. And this might not be the best place for me to be to commit crimes or look to an opportunity to commit crimes because somebody's here's watching and the cops are coming every time they call.
But you didn't say it would take 48 hours to remove them, or did I misunderstand?
Once a camp has been established, we have to notice it for 48 hours before we physically remove any of the property from the camp. Now, we can get compliance, which happens a lot. We can make an arrest if there's a crime that's been committed, and we can remove that property for safekeeping. But if it's just an encampment in and of itself, an abandoned encampment or an encampment that, you know, we need to move, that's in this restricted area, we need to give them a notice. They have 48 hours to move it, and that's just a policy and law that kind of keeps it consistent and allows us to do what we're able to do and stay out of trouble with community and lawsuits and other things. So,
Yeah, and I'll just add, I understand the concerns. A lot of these encampments, they want to be where people aren't looking and aren't watching. This residential area is not going to be super desirable for a place to post up a camp. And I know, Chief, you said something before. We've had a question about, do you anticipate an increase, you know, in residential burglaries or crimes to people's homes? They have this new access from the trail, and you had provided a really good answer, you know, on that.
yeah, I just don't see it, and we haven't seen it with the Hickshari and like for at nighttime business break-ins or at the RV park, which has no fence between the RV park and the trail. You know, if somebody leaves something unsecure, like your bike leaning up against your RV, yeah, it might get taken, but that could happen anywhere in the city if you don't take the appropriate measures to secure your property. So, and the other thing I'll say too is over the lifetime of this trail, the crimes that we respond to on the trail generally are not crimes against those using the trails so much. There's still crimes of that community committing crimes against each other, crimes of opportunity against each other. So our crimes just against the random person that's out there for a walk with their dog or out for a run, those are very, very rare. We do have the encounters where somebody has a dog off leash or has a negative encounter with somebody, and we respond and deal with those, or we'll respond and deal with the camp over a period of time. But actually a violent crime being committed against somebody, or even a theft or a robbery being committed against somebody on the trail, it's just not something that happens for the population that uses the trail versus the population that's using the trail for illegal activity. This still is generally a transient on transient type crime, or a drug dealer on drug dealer type crime, a crime of their circumstances, not a crime of the trail.
I think, Mike, you were next.
Couple of thoughts here on, as far as you're talking about the alleys, kind of similar. Really, it's not. I mean, you can put up a fence in your alley, 6 feet tall or taller if you want. You talk about what's going on with the Gulch and Greenways thing. It's going to be a CEQA violation if you put a fence up down there without a permit. It's a completely different situation as far as access in there. So I think it's kind of hypocritical one way or the other. Somebody's a hypocrite here. Either it's the Gulch and Greenways people or the zoo to Beta Zoo Trail. It's kind of do as I say, not as I do. I have a problem that you can't have both of these things and rule that way. My other thought here is you talk about a lot of these people paid a big premium to have these greenway lots. I know I did. I've got 5 acres right next to Scott. I've got 4 homeless encampments in there right now. I've called the police more times than I can count. Every time we don't have the resources to go in there and deal with that. So we were told the same thing when this other trail went in, that there would be resources to deal with it. They're still there. You obviously don't have the resources. I know it's not your fault, but there would have to be millions of dollars in the budget to deal with what you're going to have to deal with here, and I don't see that happening. The other thing is I think there's been a real lack of transparency along this process. I know for the bigger property owners on McFarland, and you say you've called on these people. Not one of them have received a call. The person who lived right there at the entrance to Zane, it's a very good friend of mine. He moved out of there because of all the problems he had on that trail that they put through there. I think this is a bigger problem than what we're wanting to admit here, and I don't think it's being addressed efficiently.
Do you have any questions?
No, just a statement.
Okay.
I do have one question. What other trails are planned
Currently?
besides what's on here? Yeah.
None.
You mean like with this project, or you mean just in general in the city?
In general in the city, because I've seen other trails attached to this project taken off, put back on, taken off a few times. Cooper's Gulch, for instance.
Well, yeah, there's definitely, so if you look at our bike plan, the bike plan for Eureka, there's a whole map of all the bike facilities that are kind of forecasted out there, whether they're short-term or long-term. There's one kind of more near-term that would be like making improvements to the trail system in Cooper Gulch to make it more of a widened trail versus, kind of a footpath in some areas. So that's probably the one there that's more coming up soon, as well as between L to M there, between 14th, 15th, there's a dip there that goes, there's no roadway there currently. We just replaced the culvert there with the Fish Passes culvert, but that'll we have an easement there to have a trail to connect between those two. Right now, it's just being used as an access way through illegal activities. This will kind of open it up and make more of a public.
Well, that's specifically what I'm talking about right there. I own a good portion where they just put those fish ladders in. Nobody called me once. I mean, I had equipment in there, digging stuff out. They tore fences down. They haven't replaced them. It's letting the homeless come in there. I had it pretty well cleaned out. Now the fences are gone. They're back in there. So that's why I have the problem with the lack of transparency.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of we were very careful about properties that we were on in there. So if there was somehow the contractor got off the beaten path onto your property, then
No, he was supposed to be on my property. That's right where the map went through, but I was never contacted.
yeah, you would have got an easement. We would have had an agreement with you to get access to the property, which we did with all those.
It's there. So I don't think he knew he was doing it, but it's definitely on my property. So.
Thank you.
Somebody.
Yeah, you want to pick?
Yeah.
Okay, I live on the east side of Bay. And I can't get onto Myrtle a lot of the times between 7:30 and 9 because of the congestion. So now you're gonna put in a traffic circle or roundabout, which is only gonna make the backup worse. Are you gonna buy our property since we can't go to work now?
No. But there's trade-offs in all, in all of life, there's trade-offs. In this case, the trade-off of, there's currently no pedestrian crossings of Myrtle, I don't know, between West all the way to probably Harrison.
Yep.
Yeah, so like having an opportunity for people to be able to cross the road safely, that's the trade-off for having potential slowdown of traffic that might impede you being able to, be able to pull out in a more quick manner.
Why not a pedestrian bridge, which would be much safer?
Pedestrian bridges are, there's a lot that goes into pedestrian bridges. A lot of people don't like to use them, is one thing that we hear oftentimes, because we hear about a pedestrian bridge over Broadway. Why don't we just throw a pedestrian bridge over Broadway? And Caltrans, we've been pushing Caltrans, and maybe this is an option. We've gotten a lot of feedback that no, people don't want a pedestrian bridge over Broadway because it's not something that they're going to be using. That's one of the things there. I think from a right-of-way standpoint, the cost, pedestrian bridges are very expensive. I mean, compare them to like a roundabout. I mean, that's a huge additional cost, and you have to be able to land it on both sides of the road, so you need, adequate space. In that area, a roundabout being in the roadway and potentially buying some lots that are vacant currently on the north side of Myrtle, there's space for that, but on the south side, you'd have to probably buy out one of those properties there, I think, to land, something that size, a pedestrian bridge, just from a footprint.
Well, Myrtle is probably your busiest street in the city.
It is,
It's
yeah.
also one of the most dangerous as it is.
Yeah.
I know I've had cars totaled and I have physical disabilities from the accidents, and yet you think the roundabout's gonna make that situation better?
And get all slow vehicles down.
I was hit twice at the intersection of Myrtle and West. One time, the guy that hit me plowed me into a Mercedes and plowed the Mercedes into a Tacoma. So obviously, that's the speed of the cars is not really the issue. It's the fact that the drivers pay no attention.
Yeah, we can't control that behavior. People drive crazy. How do we control society behavior other than slowing people down so that the accidents aren't as bad, right? I mean, it's just, I see them all the time too. I live right down there, and people fly, and it's hard to control. It's just the fact of the matter.
Well, my office used to be in Arcata where they put in the James Road roundabout coming off of 101. It took 4 years for people to figure out how to use that.
Okay, we got some more back there.
Yeah. Professor.
Thanks. I have more comments, but I do have one question I'll say to the end. First off, I want to say thank you for this format. This whole thing's been super frustrating. In 2018, we were there. We were filming city council. People didn't want this, but it went through anyway. So fast forward to the meetings we posted during COVID. They were ridiculous. We were muted. We weren't able to see anything. So I'm going to start by saying thank you, and we need more of this. A lot more of this. Has anyone, Chief, this might be for you, has anybody been in contact with the city of Portland regarding the spring water trail?
I have not
It
been
might be
involved.
Scott, it might be something that, city council looks into. It's a nightmare.
Spring water?
Yeah, spring water. It's been horrific. There's been all kinds of crime, rapes, murders, theft, all of the above. And it didn't happen until the trail started going closer to the residential areas. So I think really looking at that and maybe learning from the city who's already done this. And the trail's still there. So I would definitely do research there. And another thing, Chief, I do have to disagree. We're seeing a huge influx of homeless out there already. We've made 6 calls in 4 weeks for our neighborhood, and we've requested that I don't know what your patrol is for Sequoia Park, but I can guarantee you there's camping going on in there. And the ones that I've found in the past, I mean, they're full-blown camouflaged. But they're down there, and then those people are lurking all through our neighborhoods during the day. It's happening today. I'm over on the backside of the park. So I don't think it's fair to tell everybody that those people are going to be this way, because they already are, and it's going to get worse. So we have to have a plan, not like saying don't do this, but we need a plan to keep our community safe. Sorry, we'll be real quick. The environmental impact, I just don't even know how it's getting through. The CEQA, none of that makes any sense to me. I grew up in these woods, I know it's no stream. I know I just don't even understand it. I cleaned up camps, I pulled out every imaginable thing out of streams down in the camps by the bay. Have PTSD from it, disgusting. So we don't want that in our neighborhoods, not one camp in our neighborhood. And I think that needs to be our goal. And not to point at you, turning here, we honestly have a city council who doesn't support, in my mind as a community member and a taxpayer, they don't support EPD fully, and I think that's a problem. We need to blow up the budget and give it to EPD so we can have more patrol and feel safe on this trip. I think that's super important as taxpayer. Did everybody here? You need to be at city council meetings. You need to go, you need to show up, you need to talk, because it's really important. We have one council member here tonight, and every one of them needs to hear us talking. I'll end it with saying, have we spent $11 million yet?
No.
Where are we at with the budget?
We have not spent $11 million. I think at this point, 400,000.
Much.
So it'll be great savings if we don't do it, right?
We don't get to keep it.
Right.
Yeah, we don't get the
Yes,
money.
yes, sir.
I was wondering, has there been any consideration to officers being on bicycles and being able to actually visually know what in reality is actually going on the trail?
Yeah, so we have 2 side-by-sides right now that they patrol the trail with. So it allows them easy access and quick access along the trail. We also have 2 e-bikes that are officers, both the Old Town officer and the trail rangers, or the park rangers, are approved to ride. So we have different options right now to utilize those on the trails in the Old Town areas already, and we do that on a daily basis.
I don't think you, do you have a chance?
I just wanted to offer a different perspective. I moved into this neighborhood in 2007, and I've been walking what it will be the trail since I moved in there. And these concerns about crime and people coming into our neighborhood, folks, it's a public neighborhood. It's not an invisible force field that people don't see and that the trail will suddenly illuminate. We've already got people in our neighborhood. We already have people camping. My experience with the Expand Waterfront Trail in the city, people have the same concern about that trail. I love that trail. I use it all the time. Yes, there are still camping issues, but it is so much more improved. And the community uses it all the time. And also, as a parent of a child who was hit on their bicycle on Harrison and 18, I am so grateful that this opportunity will be here for kids to travel safely through the neighborhood. And also, as a parent of a former Zane student who had lockdowns on this campus, and a Zane student who will be starting next fall, I'm not concerned about the trail bringing harm. We see the pattern of school violence in this country. It's someone with a very deliberate plan to go to that school. It's not someone who stumbled off of a trail randomly one day. So I would just like to offer the perspective that a lot of these concerns you have, they already exist, and this trail will only improve those situations.
Thank you. Thanks.
So when you look at the CEQA report, just, what has to do with the environmental impact report, I read through it completely, and I was really impressed with the amount of these things. The detail that's left out doesn't have to do with environmental impact. The impact of people on this trail wouldn't belong in environmental impact. And I totally support about this. It is a really good idea. However,
and it's gonna sound really NIMBY, but it's not. I live on Bay, and this trail's going in across the slope from me. So, and what I'm concerned about is noise for both for all the birds there and for me, and the quiet enjoyment of my property. And I'm not concerned so much with walkers, but definitely with e-bikers going over a metal overpass. It's like a non-starter. So when you talk about the substrate, you're gonna make those walkways out of, there's no really important.
Thank you. Yeah.
Couple of quick comments. First of all, I just wanted to be a voice of support for this project. I think I've been in Eureka since before the Hickory Trail even had pavement. And every time the trails get extended, I feel like the community gets stronger and better. And a lot of the concerns people are having are community concerns. Like, I think probably everybody here for the most part is concerned about crime and safety and drug use and all that stuff. Fire, yeah, all that stuff. But I don't think those are really related to a trail as much as they are to Eureka. So, what else? Yeah, I would much rather have my kids go on this trail than say, okay, kids, have fun going down Myrtle and West and good luck. I wouldn't do it, but I'd let them go on this trail. And one last thing, I hear what people are saying. I use the trail as a runner, walker, bicyclist, and I know, I think some signage to help people know how to use the trail properly would be great. Like, it's like driving a car. You don't drive on the left if you kind of feel like it, or the right. People just kind of pass on the left, walk on the right, and bicyclists slow down for pedestrians. I think sharing is the way to do it. So I'm totally supportive of this, and I hope that I can see it.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I'll just echo that I support it. I live over, I'm not directly in the path of this, I live over in Henderson Center, but I use a lot of bike trails. I've used the Hickory since before it was actually the Hickory a couple times, back when the kinetic sculpture race used to go through what they called Devil's Playground. And the Hickory, the trail didn't create the problems that you see with Hickory. I know like those were pre-existing problems. My experience with trails is that they tend to illuminate problems and they tend to make them more visible, but I do appreciate that they also can then nip problems in the bud in some ways. Hickory has gotten way better. If anybody's been using it since before there was a trail there, it's now useful. I would also say that I really appreciate this kind of connecting Zane Middle School. My only connection to Zane Middle School is that my little sister in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program goes to Zane and does commute to Zane on foot sometimes, and I just think that it gives kids an opportunity to see an established trail and a way to get from point to point. When I'm trying to take her out biking anywhere, it's kind of like, okay, you can go along the waterfront or you can go on the road. I've taught her not to ride on sidewalks, and the more opportunities that we give kids to get around the town where they're not having to ride on the road or, where they can ride on a bike, I think it's great. You're making a connected town.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah. With respect to the trail that goes from, part of the trail that goes from Booner over to Russ Street, the Dover Street area, that's highly residential on one side and the hospital on the other side. So to perhaps inhibit this homeless question, which I agree could be a real problem, have you considered hours of operation on the trail and gates at Booner as it goes through the area behind the hospital and then down at Russ Street to shut it down at night, say 9 o'clock or something like that? Because most of the traffic, I believe, is going to be daytime traffic. People going to school or riding somewhere or going to the zoo or something like that. But if you gate it, or like big kind of farm gates at those two ends, and have a city ordinance that says no camping in this area between 9 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning or something like that, you have power then to do something. And with the gates up and, maybe some illumination and things like that, it might inhibit people coming in and setting up camp. So the chief has to wait 48 hours to give them the boot. So think about that, shut hours of operation and gates that goes in, because that's a highly residential area, which I happen to live right there.
Yeah, and that's one of the trade-offs with the funding source is this is a active transportation program funding, and the trail is considered it's a class 1 trail facility, so it's a transportation facility, so we can't close that facility. It's not like a recreation trail or a private, like a city park where we can gate it off. So that's one of the requirements of the funding, is that it does stay open 24 hours, just like a state highway or something along those lines.
Here's one possible solution real quick. If you have to get an easement, or you approach me to get an easement through my property, which I think might be highly likely, I could give you an easement, but it would be limited. Then it would be open for public use between these hours and that hours, and on both ends as across my property closed. Would that help solve the problem there about public access and all that?
I don't. It's a consideration, yeah. I think we could ask our funding, basically it's Caltrans, who's the one who handles the fund. We can look into that.
I've done a lot of easements in my past, and you can limit them almost any way you want.
Yeah.
I just want to mention, because I'm a neighbor, even though we don't live anywhere near each other, we don't have homeless encampments back there now. We don't have anybody back there now. It's very, very quiet. And sometimes I'll find like a candy wrapper when I go back there. There's literally nothing back there. Her kids used to come trespass on my land and fish in the creek. That was the extent of it. Literally just like that. Very nice. No problem. We don't have problems right now. So anything that comes in is gonna be different. Noise, anything. And we would really like it to be fenced also. That we're very concerned about trespassing. It isn't the trail. I don't mind the trail. I'm not afraid of people. I'm concerned about the environment, and I am concerned about trespassing. You guys let people wander all over the place on it. Sorry. And people really are confused about when they see green space, they think the city owns it. We've had to explain this, and I'm not talking about homeless people, but I've had to explain this to people who have come in there looking for where the trail's gonna be, and we tell them, dude, this is private property, and you end up getting in an argument, and they're like, go ahead and call the police, they're not gonna do anything, it's ridiculous. I really don't wanna spend my time like that. So I really like to see a fence. I know that goes against your greenways and gulches thing, but you guys should really consider, there's fences that allow for wildlife to go through, and it would make the whole community probably feel a lot better.
Well, I think we're in the 30% design phase, so all those kind of suggestions, we'll look at, and I think signage too, like from end to end, you are crossing private property, no trespassing, and we have municipal code already on the books, so you trespass, we could write you a ticket.
Right, well. They're like, go ahead and call the police, they're gonna take them for, I didn't wanna bother them. I didn't bother them because some guy is walking on my property, right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna call them, I know they're super busy. And that, that.
Yeah, we appreciate that, but I mean, that's what they're there for. They're for our
How about
public
a
safety.
zero tolerance for camping?
What's that?
Zero tolerance for camping, like they do at
Carson Park.
Carson Park, it's a public park. That would be a good place for all the camping, actually. Rather than in my backyard, you know what I'm saying?
Well, we do have I don't know if you saw the camping ordinance discussions.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
Did not go
we
well.
did not go well. And we have existing laws that, I don't know if you want to speak to it at all, but we do have laws on the books. They're just not as strong as we would like.
So that would allow them to come in and remove them immediately rather than 4 days later. 2 days, whatever it is.
Yeah, it really doesn't change. We have zero tolerance area. We have no camping area zones throughout the entire city under the current municipal code that we have on the books. It's an infraction, so I can't make a physical arrest generally based on that. But the 48-hour piece is something that we pretty much stick to, like I said, unless we find a crime has been committed that we can make an arrest for. and seize property for the purposes of safekeeping and or destruction based on hazmat conditions. Just to remove a camp, though, there's a whole different set of category procedures we have to follow, because the litigation behind taking somebody's property and not giving them notice if they're not there, it gets to be pretty stringent on us. And we're always feel like we're one call away from, one incident away from ending up in federal court. So we've got a policy in place that is solid. Our ranger, our sergeants, he says sergeants back there, our commanders back there that oversees that. They ensure we do it the same way every time. And that's how we're able to get the results that we get without somebody coming in and shutting us down saying that you're doing X, Y, and Z. And so that procedure is laid out, and it's been solid for us. And yeah, it takes 48 hours sometimes because we have to notice some, but we're able then to go and get it. And it does get cleaned up. And we took out 100,000 pounds of trash in 2024 through our green belts and stuff. So
We don't want 100,000.
no, and we don't either. So it's, yeah.
Yeah.
I can just speak to that because I live in the Gulch. I'm on Booner, trespassing almost every day in the backyard, walking my dog because I'm trying to keep an eye on it. Because one time I was walking there and someone was setting up camp, and we called the police. They came right out and got rid of them. And then one time between us and Outpatient Imaging, someone had set up camp, and the same thing. They put the signs up. They said you gotta go, and then 2 days later, it was all cleaned up and gone. So it did work in that way. Although I am partial to the fence because my property is dangerous and I can't have people on it. It's dangerous. I have animals. My son built this bike jump that's really risky, and I've had to kick kids off of it. So I do want to put in a vote for a fence, especially like where I live, where it's going to be a lot of traffic of people crossing. And I am concerned about those flashing lights. That's my living room right there, and if they're gonna be low enough, so I'd like to learn more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, sir.
My question has to do with the orange section of your trail colors. And specifically, where the north end of Walnut ends, I assume that's the city limit boundary. And everything south of there I assume is in the city's sphere of influence. So you do have some observation in there. So you have Walnut and all of its cross streets. My observation is that the major traffic inflow and exit from that area is down Walnut and on both sides of W and Dolbeer. So how is your planning process looking at the traffic count right now, say as well as 20 years in the future regarding integrating all of the growth of cars versus the need for wider sidewalks and more bicycles?
How do we fit it all in the roadway? Is that kind of what your context, right? Like, how do we plan?
Yeah, I think there's, in all planning, there's kind of horizons that you look at. Right now, we're looking at, in this project, especially up here, we're looking at trying to add some benefit. Really, it's kind of a two-part type of project that we have here. The way that the grant was applied for, it was an active transportation program grant. So active transportation is trying to get people out and active. There's also a component of a safe routes to schools. And we have 2 schools along this alignment. We have Zane and there's also Washington here. So these funds were focused on what can we do to improve safety for cyclists, pedestrians, and really encourage active transportation. So that's what we've proposed here, given that we really have, as you mentioned, a constrained environment to work within. So our approach here, kind of on the inside of the circle here, not necessarily, going on the outside, is to, again, address those sidewalks kind of where they exist, maybe going back, into within the right of way, but not going into the street more, but going on the backside of the sidewalk, and then having some what are fairly high level traffic stress bike facilities, the class 3 bicycle facilities. That's what we're going to be looking at in here. So those aren't set aside lanes. We're still in the design process of looking at that, but you're absolutely right. There is a lot of this is a pinch point here traffic wise, especially for vehicular traffic, right? Because you have you have Cutton, there's more expansion going on there than there is in the city. The city's pretty well built out. We have a few zones that aren't, but there's certainly, this is definitely one of the pinch points in the city with vehicles.
Yes.
I just wanted to voice my support for this project. I used to be an avid road cyclist, and pretty much when I got out of college, I quickly sought, after my third brush with someone's rearview mirror, I quickly sought a different avenue for fitness and put my bike up on Craigslist and traded it for a mountain bike long ago. And now the only injuries that I get are caused by myself. and but I having grown up in Portland, Oregon, where they actually have a lot of these types of pathways, I can get from the international airport out to my father's house, which is out very rural, and only have to hit about 5 miles of actual roadway, and be completely separated from everything else. I really appreciate these pathways and what they bring to a community, and I can at least speak for those trails up there that yes, there's camping on them, but overall you see people out jogging, women by themselves, men by themselves on the trail. They're out recreating, and the more that we get people outside and doing that, the better it is for a community as a whole. It's better for our mental health. It is it's a really important resource, and I just this is a fantastic project. The more types of these trails that we can get within our community, I'm all for it. The more likely I am to maybe actually pick up a road bike again and stop hopping gates over onto other people's gravel roads to go for a ride, so I can do it safely. So, yep.
Thank you.
I just went real quick because I know there have been 2 questions I think I heard that haven't been answered. The eminent domain question and insurance.
Thank you.
So I want to make sure we're getting 7:20, so I just want to make sure that we touch on those real quick.
Yeah, so
Quick question.
Hang on, he's gonna answer.
yeah, still got a lot of questions out there
Yeah.
that, you know,
And to be mindful of time too.
yeah, so I'll be quick. Eminent domain, that is absolutely the last, that's the last step that we want to get to. We're going to do everything within our power to avoid that. It is a part of the process that Brittany described earlier. It's part of that Caltrans process. If you go through that process, there is that at the end. None of us, council, staff, nobody wants to go down that road. But it is, like this last resort.
So it is on the table.
It would have to be approved by council.
Is that a yes?
It's not something staff would recommend at this point. We would be trying to look at any other methods.
And then insurance.
So you all have to agree on it then?
The city council?
Yes. Or is it just one?
It'd be 3-2. You gotta have 3 votes.
3 votes?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 of 5.
Can I clarify that? There's an existing city right of way between Booner and Russ that is a roadway right of way, and the city could use that for, and probably will, for a large portion of the trail. That's just a comment about eminent domain.
Yeah, there is a small section of
Yeah,
paper
there is.
right away down
Probably
there.
about 20 feet wide.
Yeah.
The other thing is, this is kind of it's a money question. For those in favor of the trail, or anybody that wants to donate money to, for example, cleanup or ongoing maintenance, et cetera, does the city have a receptacle to receive donations specifically for the trail?
Can I jump in on that?
Yes.
For funsies? Because I was the board president of the Humboldt Trails Council for a while. I'm not anymore, but the Humboldt Trails Council does have does offer insurance for volunteer trail stewardship programs and has supplies for maintenance and can receive grants, and so partners really closely with both the County of Humboldt and the City of Eureka. So that's one alternative. It's not the same, obviously, as city staff being funded to do maintenance, but it is a partnership that's been going for decades now. That's been really valuable and has helped to kind of ease some of the challenges with trail maintenance when it comes to like vegetation maintenance and trash cleanup and maintaining striping on trails and things like that. So I just wanted to jump in on that one, and then I think there's certainly more to add from the city's perspective on that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Robin, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know community services has a lot of different volunteer groups that you guys work with closely.
Yeah, well, I think the question was, do we have a mechanism to accept donated funds? And I'm sure if there was interest, the city would not turn down a donation. I think it would just be a matter of setting up an accounting mechanism.
Figure it out.
Yeah, for other larger projects, we've worked with Humboldt Area Foundation to establish a fund. There's a fund for the Sequoia Park Zoo and Sequoia Park Playground. So if there was a large community interest to support this project, I'm sure we would be happy to take your money.
But on the point of like people in the room that are supportive, contributing their time and dollars, I happen to know several people in the room who have in fact done that, myself included, and contribute a lot of time to trail maintenance as well. So I think there's a lot of folks in this community that kind of put their time and energy and money where their mouth is when it comes to this kind of thing.
Hold on, she hasn't had a chance.
I just want to voice my support for the trail. I'm a almost daily bike commuter, and also from Portland, where I know from like growing up in Portland, where besides the Water Point Trail and Esplanade Trail, it was definitely dicey to be on the streets to what it is now. We could talk about the Springwater Trail, but that's really a housing crisis that is, it is a Portland problem, it's a Eureka problem, it's a national problem, and that doesn't mean we can't have a nice thing like a trail. I want to say, like, we can still have these things and still try to work as a community to try to house our community members who are stuck on the street right now and have compassion for them and realize that, like, the clients we're worried about, they are the most likely people to be victims of those crimes. And so just try to have compassion for people who are going through really hard times, and that doesn't mean we can't have what to me sounds like a really wonderful trail, and try to make this city somewhere that you can live where you don't always have to get into a car. That's a big thing for me. I'm trying to live my life. I mean, I drove here today, which is, I worked a long day, I had to get up early and had to bring away the stuff to work, but, being able to just, like, not get in my car, like, for a whole week is huge. And I think Eureka is a place that it can be like that, and projects like this bring the city closer and closer.
Thank you.
Born and raised here, rode that bike everywhere around town. So this is, I get the concept, but biking in your kids is new. Throughout Cotton and go to the waterfront daily. Anyway, the $11 million, can we go back to that? Because I'm worried that's not enough. And is it enough? Do we know we have to get more grant funding? And if it's not enough, where's the funding coming from? I know that $1 million out of the general fund or measure as wherever that came from the taxpayers. So, kind of falls into the, people wanting to help, and taxpayers are helping, which is fine. But we didn't know that that was gonna be earmarked for this. Are the taxpayers gonna be on the line for this? Are we going to have more grant funding, or will we have enough?
We are always pursuing more grant funding, and as we get a more clear picture on costs, we continue to find different avenues. We have a number of funding sources that we've identified, grant funding sources that we're going after. And it kind of, as you go through a project, sometimes it's, like, hey, we do a water line maintenance project. We have a pretty good idea of what those costs are associated with that. You're replacing pipes in the ground, services, whatever that might be in that project. It's pretty cut and dried. These type of projects, this is a big project. This is like you're creating a whole new roadway in Eureka. Like this is, like you're doing, 7th Street. It's a total new thing. So that takes a lot more resources, and sometimes it's difficult to get a picture for like what's the end cost going to be. And so as we do that, we're identifying funding sources that we can go after. We've got a couple. We've got one in particular that we're already applied into, and we're going to continue to look for other sources.
I'm just worried with the parks, the 2 park projects have been stalled because of funding. You know, we have half-done projects, so I would hate for this project to get half done.
You mean Dios or
Yeah, it's Sequoia.
Dios is almost done. So we're almost there. It'll be done in a month or 2.
Yeah, and Sequoia Park is an entirely different beast to fund than something like this. The Caltrans and ATP funds are for multimodal transportation. So, yeah.
I live on New Farm, and there's an affordable housing unit going in. There's a senior unit that went in. I support the trail. We walk the trail every day. And we probably know what goes on the trail pretty darn well. But basically, I just want to say that it's quite visionary. It takes the long view. I can remember the skate park was like, we don't want no skate park around here. You know, there's just going to be all this trouble, and anybody that goes to the skate park and sees all of the issues that one time was in your neighborhood and you were complaining about and everything, gives all of those people a place to be. And all of us know how important exercise is in our lives, and being able to have a space where we can get away. So we definitely support this project, and believe me, I know some of the darker sides of all of this, big time.
I imagine this will be one of probably many meetings and opportunities to speak. I thank you all for coming. Do you allow one more?
Yeah, he wants to
Okay.
wrap it up for us.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing that we in our community have a hard time with is getting working professionals who want to come here and live here. You know, doctors, engineers. You know, I'm an engineer. I have the full capability of moving out of this community, going somewhere where it is more friendly, and yet my resource, you know, my brain or whatever it would drain out of this community. I care about this community. I've lived here for 20 years. And having these types of resources, just as I have traveled different places in the US, I'll say that it's definitely come across my mind when I go to a community that has a well thought out bike path system and ability to be able to travel around the city and never see a car or be anywhere near cars. And just how much healthier that city looks just in the people who live there and everything else. I think that this is a fantastic addition to our community, and it will make something like that for us. Hopefully we get more doctors, because we definitely use them, so. And nurses and everybody else.
All right. Thank you. Anything? We'll wrap up? Hey, well, thank you again. That was a lot of great questions and concerns. More to come. Yeah, thanks again. Appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone.
No, I know they. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I'm for this project. I ride my bike there. My